please come and see Frank's exhibit. It's well worth it. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm going to start with the Rossi Brothers dealership and their history. I'm going to read a bit from, some of you may remember Christian Delaplane, who did historical write-ups for the Vacaville Reporter in Solano County. Emo Rossi was born in Italy in 1888. He came to San Francisco at the age of 16. In 1908, he answered an ad placed by Roy Mays, a Dixon farmer seeking a mechanic. At the time, automobile mechanics in Dixon were far and few. Mays was also a racing car enthusiast, and he recruited Emo to drive his cars. From there, Emo Rossi went to work for Milton Carpenter, a livery stable owner and blacksmith who had expanded his business to include working on cars. They formed a partnership and expanded to include a car agency located in the livery stable, which we know today as Archer's Plaza. Then in 1913, Emo Rossi became partners with Clarence Fries. They built the downtown Dixon garage. It was a tin structure. By 1964, in anticipation of developing a display center for the equipment, the brothers purchased the old Carpenter property where the livery stable was. However, it became clear to them that it was not going to be big enough to do what they wanted to do. But it was considered Dixon's first mini mall, Rossi Mall, and today Archer Plaza. Bud Rossi said, "We saw the evolution of the harvester that revolutionized tomato industry. The first harvester employed 20 sorters, and then the invention of the electric sorter, which separated green and red fruit and dirt, eliminated most everybody. They were down to 3 or 4 people on the harvester." In 1973, the brothers let the Oldsmobile dealership go, deciding just to handle the farm equipment. In 74, they built a modern facility on 10 acres on North First Street, and in 1985, nearly a decade later, they closed down the Alice Chalmers business. Elsie Kastner contributed funds to the library to do video recordings of our older sister citizens. And one is of Emo Rossi. If you get a chance to view it, you should. It's excellent. He remembered that in the 20s and 30s, there were 6 car garages in Dixon within a 5 to 6 block area, downtown Dixon. And at that time, the population was around 800. Can you imagine? Next, let's see. It started with Leo Marvin's garage, located on the south side of A Street, which we know of as the post office today. Next, there was Charles McGimsey Ford, and that business was located where our museum is. Across the street from McGimsey Ford was City Garage. They sold Buicks, and they were a sub-agency for a Vacaville dealership. He also mentions Weagle Garage, who was a Chevrolet agency, and DeArtney had Star Agency. Anybody know what Star is? I have no idea. Star Mobiles. You remember them? Wow.
Diane, that was probably where that classic car dealer is, that railroad. Yeah, that's where DeArtney is. We know it as the Sullivan Welding Shop, back when we grew up.
Okay. Okay, Rossi Brothers sold Haynes. Haynes Automobile Company produced their cars from 1905 to 1924, and they also sold Rickenbacker, manufactured in Detroit from 1922 to 1927. Both of those were vintage vehicles. Rossi's were also a GM motor agency for Oakland Pontiac, and Pontiac stopped making Pontiacs in 2010. In 1934, Rossi's became an Oldsmobile dealer, but they stopped selling those in 1973. Dick Rossi tells me that they were the longest running Oldsmobile dealer west of the Rockies. The last Oldsmobile rolled off the line at Lansing Car Assembly, April 29, 2004. In 1929, Rossi Brothers became an Alice Chalmers dealer. And let's see, they were located on the corner of North First and C Street that we know of as Recology today. Back in the early days, dealers didn't have big lots with lots and lots of cars. They had 2 or 3 cars in stock. The customer would come, take a look, decide what they wanted, and then the car would be ordered. In 2 or 3 weeks, you would come pick up your car. Today, I think you see more like a few hundred cars on the lots. Okay, along with all the car dealerships, there were gas pumps. There's a story there. You remember? I remember. This. I know. Everybody, this is Linda Mauvais. I should have introduced you. So during the 20s, as most of you know, Highway 40 was U.S. Continental Artery, and it traveled north on Porter, made a right on A Street, over the tracks, down to Main Street, made a left, and would continue on down Curry Road, make a right on Severs, left on Pedrick, right on Russell at Cactus Corners, and drive through Davis and on to West Sacramento. So it could take you from Dixon to Sacramento an hour. So what happened was, in Dixon, the train stopped 4 times a day, both ways, between the Bay Area and Sacramento. And the crossing arms were manually operated with somebody up in a tower watching everything 24 hours. So in 1925, a Greyhound bus got caught on the tracks and hit by the train. So the State Highway Commission then moved the highway coming north on Porter Road and going straight on Adams. But there was a house in the way. I don't remember the name of the family.
Well, AG built it in the 1870s. He's the one that put the water tank there and the electric.
Okay.
AG.
So they had to move that house. Do you remember? You remember where they moved that or no?
Yes, it's right here. It's on West A Street, next
Okay.
to the Spanish home built by Peacock. It's
Oh,
the
okay.
one that is for sale today.
Oh,
Price is pending.
it's the one the Hollies lived in at one time.
And it was right
Yeah.
in the middle of what we call, well, you know where it's that little section between Valley Livestock, you know, say Marvin
Yes.
Market and A Street. It was right there, and they made a street there so they wouldn't have to go all the way down the tracks to A Street and then make the quick jog over.
Right.
So they made it so it was, took that out of the picture, that going way down there.
So when they did that, 3 more gas stations sprung up right there on the corner there of A and Adams. And let's see, one was Standard Station, and I just brought this along. That's my father-in-law. He worked for that Standard Station. And Associated Oil at Tidewater and Shell Station. So going back just a little bit, there were 11 gas pumps in a 5 or 6 block area for Dixon, 800 people. But we have all these people traveling from the Bay Area or Sacramento the other way, and it was an opportunity for Dixon to make money, right? So where were they? Marvin's Garage had a gas station, and that's where the post office is today. McGimsey Ford had one where the museum is today. City Garage was across the street from McGimsey. They had one. And then there was one on the corner where Party Plaza is. Wiggly's Garage had one where B of A building is today. And Standard Station had one in the corner of Women's Improvement Park. Across the street, where Carpenters had their shop, there was one. And then go kitty corner, and Rossi Brothers had one. And then if you go across the tracks, DeArtney, where Tony Martinez is located today, he had a pumping station. So, in a very short area. So, Mauvais Chevrolet. Charles Hughes and his brother Ivor Hughes started an automotive and farm equipment business in Dixon in 1946 under the name of Hughes Brothers. In 49, they became a Chevy dealer, built a new facility at 630 North First Street, which is now where Dixon Tire and Rims is located. In 54, they bought Nicholson's Chevrolet Company in Davis. Ivor ran this dealership. Charlie operated the one in Dixon. And the Davis one, the name was changed to Campus Chevrolet. They built a large building in 1958 that housed a showroom, offices, service center on Olive Drive. In 59, they sold the Dixon dealership to Bill Mauvais. And Mauvais closed it in 75. After 12 and a half years, they employed 21 people. Sam and Victor Cavalla had worked for Mauvais for 13 years, and they bought the equipment and opened the Dixon Auto Body Shop. So, and I think Linda's going to come up and
Thank you so much, Diane. Good afternoon. I'm Linda Mauvais. I'm Bill Mauvais' daughter and Ann Mauvais' daughter. And we came here in 1959, and I was 3 years old. My brother was 5. And we just grew up at the dealership. I remember all the cars, and I remember the showroom floor with having lots of balloons up and taffy, saltwater taffy was given out. And I just kind of wanted to come here and represent my dad today. As you know, they're gone. And I've always been a part of Dixon a little bit. I can't believe how much it's grown. It didn't have any stoplights when I was learning to drive. We had to go to Davis. And I remember being upset we didn't have a Taco Bell. Yeah, we had to go over there too. And so, but Mauvais Chevrolet does mean a lot to me. One of my favorite cars was the Camaro. And I think a lot of people really like the Camaro over the years. And one of the things I noticed with the cars nowadays, they all look alike. You go down the road, you can't tell what it is until you get up to them and you're like, oh, okay, that's what it is. But we all had a sense of knowing what the cars were when we were growing up. And needless to say, I never did get my Camaro with my dad closing up and I was just a little bit out of high school, and I was really looking forward to maybe a treat, but that didn't work. So anyway, if you're thinking about the future of buying a new car, look into a Chevrolet. Thank you.
next, I believe, is Herb. Where did Herb go? I lost, oh, Herb.
So oral history is becoming an element of the society's programming. And what you're about to see is 27 minutes of an interview that we conducted with Greg DuPratt. And in that, he tells kind of the story of DuPratt Ford. Greg is Ron DuPratt's son, and he worked at the dealership first as a mechanic, then as a salesman, and ultimately as general manager, taking over from his dad. Greg was a terrific narrator, and we encourage you to visit the Society's website where you can see the entire 90-minute interview.
He loved Fords. He had a 40 Ford convertible in college. He wanted to be a Ford dealer. He stopped in Auburn to try to, Colfax, to try to buy the dealership there, but somebody had already bought it, which worked out really well because the Chevy dealer in town was the mayor, and he put 3 different Ford dealers out of business, and there's no longer a Ford dealer there. Came to Dixon, armed with a loan from SBA and a loan from his father, and bought the dealership. There were probably 5 or 6 employees at the time. I mean, they'd sell 1 or 2 cars a month. Ford, you couldn't just buy a dealership now, but at that time you basically could, and they insisted that he have a sales manager that had been in the business for quite a while, and that guy's name was Tom Callum. And he worked here for quite a few years. He had a local named Houston Shepherd that was his other salesperson, and Carolyn Johnson, who later became Carolyn Panizza, was the office manager. It's a fairly small dealership. We're actually in a part of that building downtown here. Then he also had, there was a pizza parlor across the street that had gone out of business, and he had cars parked in the front windows of that place. And then in '61, he built the building out north of town.
And when he was here downtown, had the other Ford dealers that owned the business previously also done that kind of marketing? I mean, putting cars in the
pizza
showroom
parlor.
across
I'm
the street?
assuming he didn't invent that. I'm assuming somebody had done that. This business was, Charlie McGimsey had started it in the 20s. There were 2 different dealers in the early 50s, they only had it for a year and a half or so, and then Dad bought it in '56.
So your dad put his college degree to really good use.
Yes, he did. He had a master's degree in business administration from University of Southern California, and when you get a master's degree in that, you got accounting, you got marketing, you got merchandising, you got everything. So yeah, not many dealers have that degree. So yeah, he was kind of ahead of his time.
Did he know when he went into that coursework that he wanted to get a Ford dealership?
No, what he wanted to do was to be an entrepreneur of some sort. His father came from Italy in 1910, and at one point owned a dairy distributorship, a trucking firm, a mail route, a movie theater, and a restaurant all at the same time in Yerington, Nevada. So the entrepreneur spirit was in my dad pretty clearly. So he didn't know what business he wanted to be in, and he was getting experience and trying to figure out exactly what he wanted to do.
And when you're helping your dad at the dealership, you're doing mechanic?
I worked in absolutely every department. I worked on cars, I worked in the parts department, I sanded cars in the body shop, I washed cars. I did everything basically. My mechanical career came to an end because Dad got tired of taking me to the ER. I kept getting injured, and I'd walk in and I'd be all covered with blood, and he'd go, "Ah, not again." He says, and he finally took my tools away and said, "You're not going to work on cars anymore." And I moved to sales at that point.
So you talked about all of the hard aspects, I think, of running a dealership, keeping up inventory and things like that. But when you get down to it, isn't it really all about relationships with people, with your customers, with your maintenance workers?
Absolutely. And talking to people all day long. We have so many friends in this town just because they'd come in and they were customers, and they'd come in and sometimes they'd just stop and say hi, and the relationships are a big part of that. And when you have a dealership, we were so small in those days that it was very rewarding, and as it got bigger and bigger and less getting to know your customers. It became less and less fun over time. So yeah, the relationships. When we were 30 employees, I knew everybody. I knew their wives, I knew their husbands, I knew their kids, I knew all of that. It was really fun. And we'd put on a Christmas party every year and invite them all. When it got to be 60, it gets to be a little bit not as much fun. And when it got to 120, it gets to be less and less fun. But probably I hired a guy named Rich Bedoya, and I forget. He was working for one of the fertilizer companies to be. It became one of my best friends. He's still one of my best friends, and he just bought the dealership in Auburn and named it DuPratt Ford. And he's a tremendous human being. So yes, the relationships are what makes it worthwhile.
So you graduate in '79 and come back as a salesman?
Yes, I came back and started working just selling cars. And by then my brother had graduated, and so the whole sales staff was Dad, my brother, and me.
So give me a typical day from the time you wake up to the time you put your head back on the pillow at night.
Okay, usually get up pretty early, try to get a little exercise in before work, get to work 7:30 in the morning, open the dealership. Usually when it was small, I would usually run the dust mop over the floor and dust the cars off real quick so they look nice in the showroom. Check my list, walk out to the shop to see how busy they were, making sure that they didn't need anything, and I'd walk through to make sure the place had been cleaned up the evening before and that the trash had been put away. I checked a lot to make sure the cars were parked for the best display. You want them to look nice, and sometimes you put up a couple of hoods just in case somebody wanted to look. Make sure they were reasonably clean. You know, it's pretty hard. Dixon can be fairly dusty, and so sometimes they didn't look so good, and then I'd try to find somebody to take care of that. I'd go in the office, check to see if there was any paperwork that needed to be done, making sure that we were getting paid for, that the financing companies would make sure that we were getting checks for those. Lunchtime, Wednesdays were Rotary days, so we'd go to Rotary, eat lunch, come back at 1:30, and start that whole process again. And usually you had customers that would come in. Somebody would want to talk to. A lot of the locals that I dealt with for so long wouldn't deal with anybody else. As we got larger and had other salespeople, they wanted to talk to me, or they wanted to talk to Dad, or they wanted to talk to Val. And so we would, you end up talking to customers all day long, and then if there were any issues in the shop, then I'd get called up and say, hey, here's a problem. We've got to, and go deal with that. And if somebody's cars got banged up, I'd have to take care of that. And and then we'd usually go home we'd close up about 6 o'clock, 6:30ish, and go home, eat dinner, wrestle with the kids, and go to bed.
So you've seen a lot of Ford models.
Yes.
Which ones stand out in your mind?
Mustang, 1964, came out in April. We got our first one. It was poppy red. It was just a little notchback coupe. Dad got a space at the fairgrounds, and he took it down there, and they put ropes all around it, and the velvet rope treatment. And people were 4 and 5 deep, completely circling that car. It was unbelievable how you couldn't do that now. No, but there's not a car out there that's interesting enough, maybe a Ferrari or something. But for that Mustang, people went wild. And somebody stole the gas cap off the back because it was a cool cap. So Ford ended up making a wire cable so that you couldn't steal that. But yeah, that was May of '64. That was, I can picture that and all the people, and we were just stunned by how many people were so interested in that car. It was cool.
And did you trailer that to the fairgrounds?
No,
or
we
did you
drove it
drive
down there. Heck, I didn't. I was a kid, but yeah, they drove it down there, and it turned heads. It was so different from what was out there. So, and pretty affordable for, you know, they were in the $2,400 range, which, you know, of course now they're worth a fortune. But so yeah, that one stands out.
What else?
The Fusion that came out in '06, we got, the president of Boeing came to Ford, and Ford was floundering at the time, and they came out with that Fusion, and it sold like hotcakes. It was a tremendous car when some of our cars, I couldn't say that about. It really saved our business. We were losing market share. We were quite concerned about Ford's ability to move forward. You know, 'cause we always sold pickups, but even then, that Fusion was a tremendous car for us.
Any bad cars?
Granadas. Granadas were terrible cars. In fact, a friend of mine worked his way through college in New Jersey building Granadas, and I said, "Oh my gosh, they were terrible." And he said, "Absolutely. I was there when they built them, and they were awful. They tried to make it into an upscale, nice car, but it just was not. It gave us troubles. They were having union troubles at the time. We'd find bottles in the doors. It was awful, just awful." And of course, everybody hates Pintos, but I have a good Pinto story. I went to a friend of mine, Joe Osterman, was living in Salt Lake City. He'd been in submarines in the Navy, and he wanted to be away from the ocean as far as he could get. So he was spending the winter in Salt Lake, and he invited me over. Well, I grabbed a used Pinto to drive over there, and I changed the oil myself. And I'm driving out in Nevada, and all of a sudden the oil blows out of the car. Oh my gosh. And so I hitchhiked for about a half an hour. I had my long hair down my shoulders. Nobody, it looked like a hippie. Nobody's gonna pick you up. So I get in this Pinto, and I fire it back up. It has no oil in it. Its engine's rattling. And I went up this little rise, and then I shut it off and coasted down another rise. I went 30 miles in that car with no oil. I get to Winnemucca. They put it on the rack, and I had inadvertently pressed another rubber gasket, so it had two gaskets on the oil filter, and it didn't hold, and it blew the oil out. So they put another filter on, took both of the little gaskets off, filled it full of oil, started it up, didn't sound bad. So I jumped in it, and I drove it all the way to Salt Lake City. I get to Salt Lake City at midnight, and I get pulled over by a cop. And California uses dealer plates. When the license is expired, and I had a dealer plate on the back, perfectly legal in California, not legal in Utah at the time. So he puts me in the back of the car, and after an hour of him on the radio, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to jail over this. He says, your license plates don't match. And finally he comes back and he says, all right, I'm going to let you go. It's late and I don't want to do the paperwork. So I get back in the Pinto and go to my friend's house, spent a week there skiing, had a wonderful time, but came back in that Pinto, and it drove fine, and we checked it all out, and we ended up selling it. A guy had it. He put 250,000 miles on the thing. So everybody talks about how bad Pintos are, but that Pinto was tough because it went 30 miles with no oil.
So I take it you could have picked any car in the lot to drive. Why do you pick a Pinto, and why did your dad always pick a used car when he would drive?
Picked the Pinto because gas was extremely expensive. That would have been 76. It was like a 74 Pinto. gas was really, that was getting close to the oil embargo. It was crazy expensive. It was hard to get, and I knew it would get good gas mileage. I otherwise normally would have driven a pickup. People used to ask my dad why he was driving a particular car, and he said, "'Cause it has gas in it." he always drove them if they had gas, but he didn't put gas in very often. So.
And did he always have a personal car then?
Never. No, he would drive something home, something off the used lot, something that had been a fresh trade-in, something like that. Mom always got a demonstrator. I'll have a little story about that. In 1958, Ford made a 4-seat Thunderbird. They'd had the 2-seat Thunderbird 55, 56, and 57. Mom had never had a new car. She drove a Model A in the 40s to college at Purdue. And this car was gorgeous. She loved this car. It was silver with a red and white leather interior. Just absolutely spectacular. He came home one day and said, "I need your keys." She said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I sold your car." Well, she burst into tears. I burst into tears because Mom was crying. And he said, "Hold that thought, I'll be back." He takes the car, sells it. It was a demonstrator, sells it. He comes back and he puts us on the couch and he said, "We're in the car business. Everything is for sale. Do not ever get attached to a car again." And we never did. So everything was for sale from that day on. So.
And she was always driving a demonstrator.
Yeah, she got the demonstrator. And usually something new, and sometimes it was used, but most of the time it was new. So.
So I assume to be a prosperous business in Dixon, you need to expand your customer base well outside of Dixon. How do you do that?
Well, Rotary ended up being a part of that. Rotary tracks your attendance in coming to the meetings, and when we'd get busy and couldn't go to a meeting, then we would go make up a meeting in Winters, Davis, Vacaville, Woodland, and West Sacramento. And so you're not supposed to advertise it. That wasn't the point of doing that, but people knew what we did because they'd see the license frames that said DuPratt Ford on it, and we felt like that would give us, if they were interested in a Ford, knowing we were Rotarians and what that means to people, they would give us a shot if they were thinking about a Ford. So that was one way of doing that. Another way to do it is trying really hard for customer satisfaction, and that word of mouth gets around. We never spent a lot of money on advertising. We weren't particularly good at it, but our motto was, "We treat you like family," and we tried very hard to treat people like family. Yeah, you fail sometimes, but you try. You try hard, and I think people recognize that. And it's word of mouth gets around on that kind of stuff.
And the dealership does have a reputation, I think, still for just outstanding customer service. What factors into that?
Giving it your best effort every day, making sure your customer gets, within the best of your ability, gets their money's worth. One of the things Dad, very early, he was still here downtown, and a customer was very unhappy with the car, and he bought it back from them, gave them their money back, and that word got around town. Dixon was 2,000 people at the time, so that word got around. They were a prominent family. They're still around, and they came back, and they ended up being customers for life, customers and friends. So that's one way you do it, and you insist that your people do their best each and every day. When a technician works on a car, then you spot check them, you drive it, make sure that the problem got fixed, and if somebody has a problem with the car, you move heaven and earth to try to make it right for them. So.
no matter what it costs.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. And Dad always said, what's good for the customer is good for the dealership. So,
Do you have a feeling that your competitors didn't do that? And who are your competitors?
well, when we came to town, there was Rossi had GMC trucks and Oldsmobiles. McIntyre had Dodge Chrysler Plymouth stuff. There was an International Harvester dealer here, and there was a Chevy dealer here. And none of them exist anymore. And part of that is Dixon was so small, and the margins got so small for selling cars that it became imperative to get bigger and bigger and bigger to try to make a living at this thing. I can't say, I think everybody that was here tried to keep people happy, but sometimes some people get focused on the sales part of it and not the satisfaction part of it. So it's true of some dealers, and it's not true of other dealers.
And at the dealership, do you make more money out of the sales division or out of the service division?
The business has changed significantly. In the 60s and 70s, you made a reasonable living on selling each car, but now we're trying to keep 2 pennies out of every dollar that we take in. So it becomes imperative to try to make a profit in each and every department. But the new vehicles, you can look it up. You look at a particular vehicle, you can go look it up right now and you can find out what the dealer paid for it. So, what other business do you know what the seller of their product, do you know what their costs are? So people drive hard bargains, and so you don't make any money on that. You make a little more money in used cars because I might have the only, say, Ford Raptor used pickup for miles and miles and miles. So I've got a chance to make a little money in that. I got a chance to make a little money in the service department. It's hard work. Make a little money in parts. We make a little money in the body shop, and when we sell you the vehicle, if we finance the vehicle, we make a little more money there. So you try to keep 2 pennies out of every dollar that you take in. So it's what drives volume. Then you have to have more and more and more volume to make a decent living out of that, because of the costs of your building, your costs of your lights, your costs of all of those fixed costs.
So when you become a salesman in '79, does all your previous work as a mechanic help you in selling
Sure
cars?
it does. If somebody brings a trade in and it's got an exhaust leak, I know what that exhaust leak is, and I know pretty much what it's going to cost to fix it. So absolutely, that made a big difference. And also from the standpoint of customer satisfaction, somebody buy a car and it had a problem, and they'd come back, and they'd come back and talk to me about it. I could pretty well figure out what was going on and what it was going to take. And if it was a serious problem, then you find a nice loaner for them while you're taking care of their problem. Cars have gotten so much better now, though. In the old days, gosh, the things that we used to do in the shop that we don't do anymore. We used to overhaul carburetors. We used to do valve jobs. We'd take the heads off and grind the valves and put new valves and things like that. None of that's done anymore. Everything is plug and play. So it's a different business now.
Is it safe to say that Dixon is a car town?
Dixon was a car town. I would say probably more of a pickup truck town. But in the old days, yeah, people paid attention to cars. Every year we would have when the new Fords would come out, we'd put them in the showroom and put out some cookies and coffee and things like that for people, and people would come in and peruse the new Fords, which was always kind of fun. But when they became the same every year, then that kind of went away. And I don't know that anybody's really a car person anymore. Cars are pretty kind of bland looking to me from my standpoint, but pickups for sure. We always sold pickups, even when the cars wouldn't sell at all. We always sold pickups, so it's a pickup town.
So you've been a mechanic, you've been a salesman, a sales
Use
manager.
that term mechanic loosely. I worked on cars.
You were a bloodied mechanic.
There you go.
You've been a general manager.
Yes.
Which of those jobs did you enjoy the most?
Oh. That's a great question. I think in the 80s and the 90s, when I was just selling cars and opening up the dealership in the morning, and the people, we had 30 employees, 40 employees. I think that was when I enjoyed the car business the most. As it got bigger and as the margins got tougher and as all of that, the general manager job was not, well, I wouldn't ever describe that as fun. It was interesting because everything was different every day, but worrying about going out of business. I mean, you could have a bad month and lose money, and you got to figure out how to change things in order to adjust that, because we closed our books every month. You had 12 different sets of profit loss calculations, and it wasn't nearly as much fun when I wasn't worried about the business and when I was just selling cars and talking to people. That's when it was fun. I wasn't a good enough mechanic to have that to ever be fun.
So I wanted to ask what was most challenging. And it sounds from what we've said so far that perhaps being a mechanic was the most challenging and being the general manager was the most intellectually challenging.
That's a good description. The physical part of being a technician, and I marvel at some of these guys that are still working on cars, you know, clambering in and out of them, leaning over hot engines. Physically tough, and I've had a couple of them that retired fairly young just because they were beat up. And you're right about general manager being intellectually challenging, making sure that all the departments have what they need to be profitable and to take good care of customers. There's a lot to that. And it's I go home exhausted from each day.
And are you ever really just at home when you turn the key in the lock and walk away from the dealership at the end of the day?
I would get calls all hours from people that needed help, needed something. Not a lot, but for the most part, yeah, you're still on, and your mind's still rolling. You're still thinking about what happened today, what I got to do tomorrow. So, yeah, it's a challenging business. I'll say that.
Well, thank you, Herb, for that wonderful interview with Greg. And Greg could not be here today, so he lives in Colorado. So thank you, Herb, and also Diane for the wonderful presentation, and Linda for speaking. Would anyone, we'll open this up now to any comments, or does anyone have a special memory that you would like to share?
Okay, all right, you can hear me now. Anyway, Mauve Chevrolet. I happen to be a third owner car of a 57 Chevrolet, white Chevrolet. When I was in high school, it was my first car. And I guess some of my classmates had a few rides in that car. It was really a fun car. And I have to tell a little about the original history of that car. Ronnie Tooley was the original owner of that car, and he was a high school graduate, I think 1956. And the rumor was he worked for Mauve Chevrolet. I don't know if that's true or not, if you can remember that. Ron Tooley. Ronnie Tooley. Yeah. Yeah. Too young, right. Anyway, that's a long time ago. So Ronnie Tooley had ordered this, my 57 Chevy. Yeah, it was a good year. And so I guess he'd like a performance car, and he saw that Corvette had come out 2-3 years prior to that, and each year the Corvette progressively gotten more horsepower, fancier racing engine, and somehow he got this same Corvette engine ordered into a 57 Chevy Bel Air sedan. And the day the car arrived by truck, the rumor is the mechanic got a hold of that car and drove it over the parking lot, and he wanted to find out what kind of engine this thing really had. So he dumped the clutch, put it in first gear, revved it up, and took off, and it burned 150 feet of rubber. That was his first day of life of that car. So, and afterwards, I think it probably burned a little more rubber too.
Linda might like this picture. They used to have a business card, and my dad worked at Mauvais, and he gave this out. And so we've had it since 1960. So my daughter made a copy. She thought you might like to see it. And he worked there for quite a few years. He worked for Stitz Chevrolet in Winters, and when they went out of business, then he changed to Mauvais. So anyway, I'll give you that picture. Thank you. Who do I hand this to? I'm sorry, Kim.
I've got a story about 3 different dealers, but I'll just get you one. About DuPratts, I guess. I had a Chevy pickup, and I was going to Woodland, and a tomato truck down by Pedrick Produce, a tomato truck made an illegal left turn and hit me broadside. Threw me in, and I knocked down it's a metal light pole there, and the pickup kind of looked like a banana. I was there with my dog, and that was in the day we had FM radios, and I called Tadlock, told him I'd been hit, and it broke the front windshield out, so me and the dog crawled out through there, and they came and towed the pickup home, and I was all right. The CHP said, when I see a wreck like this, we're ready to call the coroner. But anyway, they took it, AAA took it to Ron DuPratt. And the insurance company, Royers, kind of didn't pay much attention, and I called him a few weeks later and asked him what's happening. And he says, "Oh, it's parked at Ron DuPratt's." So pretty soon they called me back and said, "Well, it's been there a month, and they're charging us some big fee, and it was going to cost, $1,000 or something for this parking the pickup there." He says, "If you'll have our body shop fix it, then we'll waive the parking fee." So I wasn't really happy about getting that pickup back after what it looked like, and they took it all apart. They took the frame over to Sacramento, and there's somebody that had a specialty line. They bent the frame back to the original specs, put the body on, painted it. It was beautiful. And they called me, "Your pickup's ready." So I went in, looked at it, and I walked up to the sales room and said, "I want to trade this pickup in for something newer." They were charging me $4,000 for the body work, and they offered me $3,500 for the pickup. And I says, "Wait a minute, I'm a young guy here. I've got going to buy a lot of vehicles in my life. That's not a good answer." No, $3,500 for a $4,000 repair job. So I got my pickup, took it home, and I went to a Chevrolet dealer down in Fairfield and bought 2 pickups. And so I've always thought that was just not a very smart way to treat me. So anyway, that's one story.
I just wanted to say something real quick. My boyfriend Frank and I came today because we live on Rossi Drive. So we saw it in the newspaper that it would be fun to learn about the Rossi dealership. So thank you very much. And also we used to ride with Ron DuPratt, so it was a fun little horseback riding, not cars. So it was fun to be able to see a little video of him.
Well, I had a 55 Chevy, and with 3 little kids. It was a Del Rey. It was black and white, and I just needed good transportation. It was before seat belts, but I managed to get it, so I thought it was safe, and it always was. Where did I leave you off? Anyway, it was fun having that 55 Chevy.
A little tidbit about Ron DuPratt Ford. They're awesome. We actually grew up on the same street with them, with Val and Greg and Ron, and so we would see them coming home with their new Fords, and they would see us with our Chevrolets. So, yeah, it was always never really a rival thing, but we, yeah, definitely I can still see that in my mind. So, yeah, great people.
Well, I'm going to be talking. I'm not going to do DuPratt or Mauvais. I'm going to talk about Bob McIntyre. My dad made many a car dealers, made Bob McIntyre a very rich car dealer. He would go in there and he'd get refreshments. If you know Bob McIntyre's business, he had the dealership in what they call the Buckhorn Bar. And my dad would go in there and Bob would be bartending, and we ended up over the years, I know he got a used 59 Chevy Impala, and it was hot, okay, but it was a used one. And we also bought a 57 Dodge pickup, which was a great pickup. We loved it. And also I went to college, and he also purchased 2 Valiants. And a Valiant, is a very economical car. And we drove, I'll tell you, those Valiants. Who was talking about the oil? DuPratt was talking about the oil. I'll tell you, those Valiants, I think we changed the oil maybe once a year. But, I mean, it was heavy oil, I'll tell you, by the time it was changed. But those Valiants ran forever. They had a slant 4 in them. They're a very good car. And Bob McIntyre, he did a good business there. He didn't go out trying to sell a lot. You had to go to him. He didn't look you down. And there also, if you see, we have some advertisements here that we got out of the Dixon Tribunes over the year, showing their ads over the years. So,
I just wanted to give a shout out to the DuPratt Ford. Now I know they're owned by not the DuPratts anymore. However, they are still very community focused. They now when the DuPratts owned the dealership, they let all of the youth sports groups use their brand new pickups to drive down the Mayfair Parade every year. I don't know if they still do that, but I work at Dixon Family Services. They support us. They donate to us. They actually sponsored, we're a sponsorship of Comedy Night last year. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Ron DuPratt. Even though they're different owners now, they're still very community minded.
This one is about Mauvais Chevrolet. When my brother was a couple of years older than me, graduated from high school, for some unbeknownst reason, my folks decided to buy him a new car. So my dad and I and my brother went into Mauvais, and that was 1960, I believe. Anyway, it was the first year that the Corvair came out. And that was a rear engine, air-cooled car. And we sat there and we negotiated, and finally they said, we'll sell it to you for $2,000. And that's kind of unbelievable today, but that's what it was. And they come back with all this paperwork to sign up for the credit program. So we make payments on the car. And my dad said, no, we're just going to pay cash for that. They almost cried because they were giving us the car and they were going to make the money on the payment thing. So that was that story.